In our series of pre-election segments, we turn to question 2 on charter school expansion. A yes vote would raise the expansion cap. This would allow 12 more openings or expansions in Massachusetts every year. With us tonight are 2 parents with children in district and charter schools. Calling for a yes vote is the State Director of Families for Excellent Schools, Keri Lorenzo, and for a no vote from Save Our Public Schools, Malika Williams. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
I know you're both champions of these different kinds of schools. I want to start with Keri. Why would you be a champion of charter schools?
Well, my children actually started out in district schools. My oldest is a special needs child and started out in a district school. And from kindergarten, we knew he'd need to be on an IEP. And unfortunately, even in that first year of school, we struggled with a district school placement. He was suspended 26 times in kindergarten and was just failed kind of at every turn. And I couldn't get any help. And we knew it wasn't the right place for him, and he was already falling through the cracks. So we made the decision after attending many meetings, advocating for him to try a charter school placement. And when he entered the charter school, his IEP was then fully implemented. He's been able to blossom, and it's been an extraordinary experience for us. And there are thousands of other parents who want to have that option if they see their children falling through the cracks in a failing school or a school that's failed them. And that's why I'm here today to advocate for yes on 2.
Malika Williams, why be a champion for the district schools?
Well, the district schools are what gave my child the feeling of he belonged. He's not pushed out. He's not sitting facing a wall at his desk. He sits with other kids. He's able to use his skills of social skills and his emotional skills. He's learning. He's not pushed out of the classroom. He's learning, and he stays in the classroom.
I want to ask about choice. I'm going to start with Malika Williams this time. There are a lot of people, waiting to get into charter schools, and they're waiting to get into desirable district schools. So how would this question affect that?
I would say first and foremost that, the good thing is that our public schools, there are some public schools that were level 5s and level 4s. They've gone up to 2.
Those are underperforming levels, right?
Right. Underperforming level would be a 5. We have a lot of schools that were 5s. They're now 2s and 3s. So the work has already begun in making public schools better. I would also say that parents are more involved. This question has definitely put a fire to everyone around education, to be more involved, to understand the question clearly, to understand that for many of us, this question is not just about schools. This is going to roll over into public resources as well.
Turning to Keri, what about that, the choice effect here? What would change depending on the outcome here?
Well, right now in Boston alone, there are 12,000 children who are currently in charter schools. There are 12,000 more parents who want that option for their children. That's 38% of Boston families that are looking for charter placement. So if you have that many families that are interested and there's a fire to actually have access to these schools because they're high quality, high performing schools, then that tells me that parents are really aching for this choice. They're anxious about it and they want to see it happen. We've had Metco in the city of Boston for 50 years. For 50 years we've been telling parents, we're going to send your kids to excellent schools, but they have to be out of district. We're going to get our act together and fix these schools. It's been 50 years parents have been waiting. Parents have had enough. They know this is an option that works for their children. They want that option, and they're standing up to demand it.
We're talking with Keri Lorenzo from Families for Excellent Schools and Malika Williams from Save Our Public Schools. Malika, what about the performances of these different kinds of schools? Because people, they're out there, they're wondering. I mean, right now, I saw a figure today, 55% of the district schools are still underperforming in Boston, and it's been a problem for a long time. Mm-hmm. So what about people who say, well, we can't wait?
I would say that the disproportion of public schools, people saying not doing what they need to do. I would say as a parent, I'm going into all schools, and I would say that you see that on both sides. And that's the reason for us not to bring any more. There's work that needs to be done on both sides, and to expand and bring more. And when you say choices, we got to be really careful with choices, because as Keri said, she is a child that has special needs. I have a child that has special needs. When we bring in choices, though, are we really looking at the children that are going to need these services? Right now, I know for a fact, I can speak heavily along the public schools. We are definitely educating and doing a lot better with our children with special needs. Charter school has a very low percentage of children that they're dealing with special needs. I think that at this time, there's already an allotment that has been given to charter schools. Let's build on what you've already have for the allotment. Why lift to put us in a deficit? Because lifting this is going to put us both. When you don't have the money that you need to fully fund a school, you can't give a good education. And doing this and lifting, where you say it's a lot more choices for parents, charter schools are able to run independently, where public schools adhered. There's a governance of those schools. And so until we get that control over the schools and making sure that both sectors are doing well by all children, we shouldn't be doing anything. We need to fix that first. That has to be fixed first. And I just like to say, the kids that have gone to MECO, there's been issues with a lot of kids that went to MECO that have come back and gone to public schools as well and are doing great.
Keri Lorenzo, what about the charters? I mean, there are studies out there showing some very impressive numbers academically, even when you compare similar students who tried to get into charters. But on the other hand, no, there have been doubts raised about their inclusiveness and able to retain kids who might be struggling.
Yeah, dating back to 2010, when the legislature took a hard look at these numbers, there were some problems in terms of outreach and how do charter schools, because charter schools are really, you've got to opt into them. You have to know they exist. You have to know your child can access them, understand what they're about. When I first started out as a parent, I had no idea that this was even an option. So in 2010, the legislature said, you've got to meet these goals in terms of outreach to these communities. And that's why you see there's a lot of misconception about whether or not these numbers, whether charter schools are doing outreach, whether they're accepting these kids. They are. From 2010, there's been incredible reform around charter schools. They absolutely do outreach to the ELL students as well as the special needs students. In addition, charter schools are majority minority in Boston. They are performing incredible things for low-income communities and communities of color in Boston. The numbers don't lie. These schools are providing incredible opportunities for kids who have never had it before, and we're seeing that bear out in terms of kids who are going to college, kids who are graduating. It's incredible how we're able to break down the achievement gap and overcome cycles of poverty in Boston just by having these schools here.
Keri, I want to ask about the financial impact of yes winning, because I've heard everything from saying it will not hurt the district schools and on the other end of the spectrum that it will be a substantial setback. What do you see?
Well, of course, I'm going to say there's no impact, but you don't have to take my word for it. The Boston Globe and the Boston Herald have looked at this. We've had third-party folks, independently study this. There is no impact to district schools. You'll hear the number $400 million thrown out a lot statewide in terms of, this is the money that's allocated to charter schools. Charter schools educate 3.9% of the children in Massachusetts and get 3.9% of the funding. In addition, there's not a lot of talk about the fact that when a charter school kid leaves a district school, that district is reimbursed 225% over 6 years. That doesn't happen when a district school kid leaves and goes to another district, moves out of city, or if a district school kid leaves and goes to a vocational school or a private school or a Catholic school. There's no reimbursement there, only when charter school kids leave. So the facts are clear. The Boston Globe and the Boston Herald have looked at this. They never agree on anything, but they agree on the fact that this is really a misconception and it's misinformation that's been promoted.
Malika, what do you see as far as the
I disagree with that, and I disagree because we need to educate a little bit more with the monies that follow our children. Kids are educated from sending districts. And in this budget that we have a foundation budget and we have our facilities aids rate. Children that require a lot more services, the monies for those kids are a lot more versus a child that doesn't require those. So we have a system where kids, like you said, you're educating 3.9. I'm going to give you the 4%. They're educating 4%, we're educating the rest. So when the money is sent over, they're being paid disappropriately according to the children that they serve. So in a sending district, depending on the child's need, the money is a little bit different. When they receive their money, they're receiving monies for children that they're not educating. So in that budget, it should be, the formula needs to be redone. The formula for our budget needs to be redone. So this way, when we do reimbursement, it is given directly at 100% according to who you're educating. Right now, the way the formula is, you're receiving money for children that you're not educating, which gives it a disproportionate within the budget. You're receiving more than you should according to who you're educating, which lopsides our budget.
Well, I don't agree on that.
I want to start to the next topic here, Malika Williams, and this is about discipline. I have heard about problems in the charter schools and in the district schools.
Yes.
So what's the difference here?
I would say that the difference is in that arena that the research, and as Keri stated before, the Globe and the Herald, they put out information. It's amazing to me that people are really selective in the information that they want to share. And I would be just brutally honest and say, DESE, Department of Early Secondary Education, we've asked for them to release the information showing the numbers on the children that are being suspended the most. And when you talk about the urban community of children, Latino and Black children, our boys are being suspended with disabilities at a higher rate. When a child is suspended from school, they're losing time from school. So those numbers of suspension are a lot higher in charter schools for kids that have disability, and unfortunately it's showing that it's happening more to our Black and our Latino children. And you know, there are a lot of children in charter schools, especially in the district I live in, that are DCF and DARE, and that's foster care. And I'm showing that those numbers of those children, we're not even looking at the trauma that those kids might even come in with. And we need to do a better job of doing that. So the suspension rates, if you are a child with disabilities, you're 2.3% times higher to be suspended. And when you're suspended, you're not learning. You're out of the building.
Keri, the recent studies show that 7 of the 10 schools with the highest suspension rates in Boston were charters. So, I mean, isn't that a problem?
Suspensions are handled a little bit differently in a charter situation. When a suspension happens in a charter environment, it's really a crisis moment, because in some schools it's looked at as a moment where, you know, obviously what's happening in that classroom is not working for that child, so there needs to be immediate intervention so that other kids' learning is not impacted. And there needs to be a deep dive in terms of what's happening in that child's educational experience that's causing them to act out or disrupt classrooms or whatever the behavior is that's immediately addressed. What's not talked about side by side is the fact that while there have been higher rates of suspensions in charter schools, the attrition rates are lower in charter schools, meaning that while a child may have these moments of crisis where we've got to stop the world and say, listen, this behavior is inappropriate, you're disrupting classroom learning for everybody here, we've got to figure out what's not working for you and change it, which is something that's different in a charter environment where you're actually able to do that. Those kids are actually staying in the schools. They're staying with us. They're graduating. They're continuing on because they see that direct investment in them personally, and there are changes made to make sure that that educational environment is adequate for that child. And I totally understand. I mean, it's a concern. And in some of the schools in Boston, there has been some controversy around, you know, the use of suspensions, how we talk about it, whether or not they should even be called suspensions because of how they're handled. But, you know, that's certainly, charter schools are not perfect. They don't work for every child. They're a different kind of academic situation. But they do work for a lot of kids. And there are a lot of parents that understand the fact that some children need that structure. They need that kind of classroom where there is a different environment. It's not as loose, it's not as free-flowing perhaps as, you know, your standard district school. Kids are not as disruptive. They're not disrupting an entire classroom. There's a point of intervention there where you know, we recognize that this is disrupting an entire class and something's got to happen. And that's not a bad thing from a parent perspective.
Thank you both very much, Keri Lorenzo and Malika Williams.